Pope Nicholas V issued the Papal Bull Dum Diversas on June 18, 1452. It authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to reduce all Saracens and pagans and any other non-believer to perpetual slavery. This facilitated the Portuguese slave trade. The same Pope wrote the bull Romanus Pontifex on January 5, 1455 to the same Alfonso as a follow-up to the Dum Diversas. It extended to the Catholic nations of Europe dominion over discovered lands during the Age of Discovery, along with sanctifying the seizure of non-Christian lands. It encouraged the enslavement of native non-Christian colored people in the New World. We, weighing all and singular the premises with due meditation, and noting that since we have formerly by other letters of ours granted, among other things, free and ample faculty to the aforesaid King Alfonso to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his and their use and profit, by having secured the said faculty, the said King Alfonso, or by his authority, the aforesaid Infante justly and lawfully has acquired and possessed, and doth possess these islands, lands, harbors, and seas, and they do of right belong and pertain to the said King Alfonso and his successors. More often than not, true history never seems to fit the given narrative. The more we learn, the less we know. In 1492, Cristobal Colonus, more famously known as Christopher Columbus, set off on a voyage. Contrary to popular opinion, his main mission was to conquer Jerusalem and find Solomon's gold mines. The year 1492, an important milestone in the histories of Europe, Islam, and America. Let's not forget Christianity and Judaism. It marks the culmination of the process of Reconquista with the capture of Granada on January 2nd, which ended the Muslim political presence in Spain. It also marks the beginning of a new era in Columbus's discovery of America on October 12th. The discovery gave such an impetus to exploration and expansion, colonization and nationalism, that it is looked upon as a great event of the Renaissance. Yet its birth in medieval crusading milieu is most often underrated, if not totally forgotten. The narrative claims Columbus was only looking for an island called the Antilles in the Atlantic, that he was wholly guided by a mysterious pilot, and that his proposal to go to Asia and other details of his journals are all fabrications. Columbus and the Recovery of Jerusalem. Abba Hamdani. The beginning of Columbus's voyages to the New World coincides with the culmination of the Spanish Reconquista and carries over the latest crusading zeal. Columbus's diaries reveal that his Empresa de las Indias has involved a master plan of contacting the Mongol and pro-Christian Grand Khan in the east. Columbus called his voyages Empresa de las Indias, the Indian enterprise. The word India in the Middle Ages had no exact geographical meaning to Europeans. It was a convenient expression denoting the East beyond the Mohammedan world. 1492. Journal of Christopher Columbus. First encounters between Europeans and Native Americans were dramatic events. In this account, we see the assumptions and intentions of Christopher Columbus as he immediately began assessing the potential of these people to serve European economic interests. He also predicted easy success for missionaries seeking to convert these people to Christianity. Thursday, October 11th. Presently, many inhabitants of these islands assembled. What follows is in the actual words of the Admiral in his book of the first navigation and discovery of the Indies. He says, that we might form great friendship, for I knew that they were a people who could be more easily freed and converted to our holy faith by love than by force. Gave to some of them red caps and glass beads to put round their necks, and many other things of little value, which gave them great pleasure, and made them so much our friends that it was a marvel to see. They afterwards came to the ship's boats where we were swimming, and bringing us parrots, cotton threads and skins, darts, and many other things, and we exchanged them for other things that we gave them, such as glass beads and small bells. In fine, they took all and gave what they had with good will. It appeared to me to be a race of people very poor in everything. They go as naked as when their mothers bore them, and so do the women. Although I did not see more than one young girl, all I saw were youths, none more than 30 years of age. They are very well made, with very handsome bodies, and very good countenances. Their hair is short and coarse. Hidden Brain. In An American Secret, the untold story of Native American enslavement. All countries have national myths. The story of the first Thanksgiving, for example, evokes the warm glow of intercultural contact. European settlers struggling to survive in the New World, and Native American tribes eager to help. But as many of us learned in history class, this story leaves a lot out. This week on Hidden Brain, we explore an open secret that from the time Christopher Columbus arrived in the New World until the year 1900, there were as many as 5 million Native people enslaved in America. The enslavement of Indians was common during the Spanish exploration and colonization of New Mexico from 1540 to 1821. Slaves of the Spanish included a few of the Pueblos living in the Spanish colony, while most slaves were captured from other Indian tribes in the region. Women were more valued than men as slaves. Indigenous slavery in the Caribbean. Noel E. Smith. From 1492 until the 19th century, Spanish, French, English, and Dutch colonists enslaved Native Americans to the tune of at least 5 million, if not more, and forced them to toil in the West Indies. The history of enslaving indigenous peoples in the Americas has mostly been obfuscated by colonial European record-keeping practices. Indeed, records relegate native slaves to a profound silence and invisibility. Throughout his years in the Americas, Columbus forced natives to work for the sake of profits. Later, he sent thousands of Taino Indians to Spain to be sold, and many of them died during the journey. During his voyages through the Caribbean islands and the Central and South American coasts, Columbus came upon indigenous people that he labeled Indians. Columbus and his men enslaved many of these native people and treated them with extreme violence and brutality. While he was governor of what is now the Dominican Republic, Columbus killed many natives in response to revolts, according to History.com. To prevent further rebellion, he would have the dead bodies paraded through the streets. 1495, Columbus enslaves the Arawaks and commits genocide. Columbus and his men round up Arawak men, women, and children and enclosed 550 of them in pens and 4 caravels bound for the slave market of southern Spain during his second voyage to the New World. Approximately 200 perished during the passage, and their bodies are cast into the sea. After the survivors are sold as slaves in Spain, Columbus later writes, "Let us, in the name of the Holy Trinity, go on sending all the slaves that can be sold." Additionally, while in Haiti, Columbus orders all natives 14 years or older to collect a certain amount of gold every 3 months. An impossible task since there is so little gold there. If Arawak natives do not collect enough, Columbus has their hands cut off and tortures them. Bartolomeu de las Casas, a young priest, witnessed many atrocities committed by the Spaniards against native peoples. He later wrote, "I saw here cruelty on a scale no living being has ever seen or expects to see." Las Casas describes the treatment of natives thus: "Our work was to exasperate, ravage, kill, mangle, and destroy. Small wonder then if they tried to kill one of us now and then. The admiral, it is true, was as blind as those who came after him, and he was so anxious to please the king that he committed irreparable crimes against the Indians." Las Casas also notes that the Spaniards thought nothing of knifing Indians by 10s and 20s and of cutting slices off them to test the sharpness of their blades. Cultural anthropologist and Stanford professor Emerita Delaney introduces us to an unfamiliar Christopher Columbus as a product of his times when, she says, apocalyptic millennialism dominated Europe. Columbus thus believed that his role was to obtain enough of the fabled gold of the East to launch a crusade to conquer Jerusalem and prepare for the second coming of Christ. Delaney argues that Columbus believed that the discovery of the Caribbean island was an integral part of an unfolding cosmological drama. Using the writings of medieval theologians, the author writes, Columbus calculated that the world would end in 155 years. He attempted to convince Spain's sovereigns that the gospel had to be preached everywhere so all the world's people could be saved, and that Jerusalem had to come under Christian control. Christopher Columbus. The name evokes visions of sailing ships, strange lands, adventure, and discovery. His likeness, carved in marble or cast in bronze, stands in cities such as Barcelona, Madeira, Genoa, Havana, Cartagena, San Juan, Santo Domingo, and Washington, D.C. Have you ever pondered the reason why Columbus decided to sail in search of a new land in 1492? The trip is famous, known to every schoolchild, but the reasons for it are considerably more complex than commonly supposed. In 1492, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand had issued an edict of ejection regarding the Jews. It decreed that every person of Jewish ancestry had to leave Spain or be executed. As a result, several Jewish businessmen went to Christopher Columbus, a Genoese Jew whose family had supposedly converted to Christianity under duress, and pledged to finance his efforts to discover a new land. They purchased 2 of the 3 ships that carried Columbus and his sailors across the ocean to find the territory of America. More than 500 years after he, quote unquote, discovered the New World, kicking off centuries of exploration and colonization of the Americas, Christopher Columbus is honored with a federal holiday on the second Monday of every October. However, as historians have continued to dig into the life of Christopher Columbus, controversy has arisen over continuing to honor the Italian explorer as a hero. Columbus saw indigenous Americans as obstacles. Like many European explorers, Christopher Columbus encountered indigenous peoples throughout his voyages. There are three main sources of controversy involving his interactions with indigenous peoples he labeled Indians: the use of violence and slavery, the forced conversion of native peoples to Christianity, and the introduction of a host of new diseases that will have dramatic long-term effects on native peoples in the Americas. In an era in which the international slave trade was starting to grow, Columbus and his men enslaved many native inhabitants of the West Indies and subjected them to extreme violence and brutality. On his famous first voyage in 1492, Columbus landed on an unknown Caribbean island after an arduous 3-month journey. On his first day in the New World, he ordered 6 of the natives to be seized, writing in his journal that he believed they would be good servants. Throughout his years in the New World, Columbus enacted policies of forced labor in which natives were put to work for the sake of profits. Later, Columbus sent thousands of peaceful Taino Indians from the island of Hispaniola to Spain to be sold. Many died en route. Others that were left behind were enslaved and forced to search for gold in the mines and work on plantations. Within 60 years after Columbus landed, only a few hundred of what may have been 250,000 Taino were left on their island. As governor and viceroy of the Indies, Columbus imposed iron discipline on what is now the Caribbean country of Dominican Republic. According to the documents discovered by Spanish historians in 2005, in response to native unrest and revolt, Columbus ordered a brutal crackdown in which many natives were killed. In an attempt to deter further rebellion, Columbus ordered their dismembered bodies to be paraded through the streets. In addition to the controversy over enslavement and violent rule, the age of exploration that Columbus helped lead had the additional consequence of bringing new diseases to the New World, which over time helped devastate native populations. Eventually, his methods and actions caught up with Columbus. A number of settlers lobbied against him at the Spanish court, accusing Columbus of mismanagement. In 1500, the king and queen sent in a royal administrator who detained Columbus and his brothers and had them shipped home. Although Columbus regained his freedom and made a fourth and final voyage to the New World, he had lost his governorship and much of his prestige.